Hi, my name is Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and welcome to this SAG-AFTRA Foundation Conversation at Home with Maz Jobrani. Today's guest is an author, actor, comedian. His book, I'm Not a Terrorist, but I Play One on TV, is an LA Times bestseller. He's also one of the founding fathers of the Axis of Evil comedy tours. Currently, you can catch him in the film A Simple Wedding. His Netflix special, Immigrant, is still on Netflix. And also on Instagram Live, where he's making the best of this very odd situation. Please welcome Maz Jobrani.
Hi, Jenelle. Thanks. You said I was a founding father of the Axis of Evil comedy tour, which is I've always heard founding member, but founding father sounds even more official. I appreciate that.
I like founding father because maybe it was watching Immigrant the other night got me thinking about all those things. But hilarious. Yeah, founding father, why not?
Sure.
This is primarily SAG actors who sort of tune into these, although it's open to everyone. But just sort of tradition, I like to ask people, how did they get their SAG card?
Oh, that's a good question. The way I got my SAG card, so I think it was 1999, maybe somewhere in that range, where there was a movie called Mariam. It was an independent movie by a friend of mine. His name is Ramin Seri. He'd written a movie about an Iranian girl living in New Jersey during the right when the hostage crisis happened. And so it was a small film. And as a matter of fact, sorry about that. That's probably my, hello, are you there?
Oh yeah, can you see me?
Yeah, oh my God.
I didn't hear anything if something's going on that end.
No, you know what's happening?
Is your screen?
This is part of it. So this is right now, my kids are at home learning on Zoom. And whenever their recess time or whatever it is happens, my phone, which is connected to the FaceTime and the iPads and all that stuff, it starts blowing up with my daughter's 9 years old. All of her friends start calling her and they do these, they do FaceTimes together and everything. So whereas my son during his recess is like, I don't know, trying to just go be on his own, my daughter's super social. She's like, let's talk, girls. So then my phone just starts blowing up. And no matter what device I'm on, it starts going off because every device is connected to every other device. And they're too young to have their own full time. So anyway.
So in her time when she's not Zoom learning on the computer, she wants to be on the computer talking to people?
It's the recess. So she's like, to her credit, she goes outside and gets on the swing and kicks balls and stuff like that as well. But one of the big things that happens right around this time, because right now we're recording this late morning, it's their break time. And so as soon as they all are done with their teaching, it's like there's 3 or 4 of them from different parts, and they all just start calling each other. And I'm like, then I ignore it if my daughter's like not hearing it. She's outside playing. I'm like, let her just play. And then they'll start texting. They're like, hey, it's me. Pick it up. And I'm like, it's not. I'm not Mila. This is her dad. Leave her alone.
It's such an interesting insight into. I'm still impressed with how parents are coping during this pandemic and how virtual school works.
Well, it's actually, I'll be honest with you, they've been really good. We have a good school. I'm very happy with what they've done, and the kids are on the Zoom all the time, and the teachers are very they're on top of it, and then our kids in general are not very they're not video gamey kids. So whereas my son, actually, one of the classes he's been taking has been chess. So he'll get on and play chess. But a lot of times we go outside, play. But that said, they're social. And so at a certain point, these kids, especially my daughter, the 9-year-old, she'll want to see her friends. She'll want to do FaceTimes. And so it's hard to limit the screen time. End of the day, we've been trying to do movie nights together. So that's part of our thing. So they're going to have screen time regardless. So all the rules that were written about give your kids an hour of screen time a day, out the door, gone. Not at all an issue. It's just, you can't do that. Yeah.
And by the way, an hour a day is nothing. Come on. That's me playing Scrabble.
Oh, listen, when I was a kid, and this is like early 80s, my parents, immigrant parents, we came from Iran in the late 70s, moved to Northern California, and back then, no parents didn't play catch with their kids. My parents would be like, go do something. I'd be sitting in front of the TV for like 3 or 4 hours at a time. Because back in Iran, I left when I was like 6ish. So when I was 4 or 5, I have memories. The number of cartoons back then, it was like, you'd watch cartoons from, let's say, 3 o'clock to 3:30 or 4. That was it. Then it was back to regular programming. Come to America, and it's like Woody Woodpecker, Popeye, Bugs Bunny, Leave It to Beaver. It just goes for hours and hours. And I would just sit there like,
But you turned out okay, so obviously it's fine.
I don't know. I really don't know. I sometimes I go, my attention span isn't that good. When I'm in a meeting, sometimes I'm kind of like, I want to be out of here. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, you want to change the channel.
Yeah. Want me to finish the story on the
please.
thing?
Yeah.
So my friend had written this movie, small independent film. And actually, Roger Ebert that year called it, he put it into Roger Ebert had his own film festival back then, or films he would pick. And it was called the Overlooked Film Festival. And he considered that movie Maryam, Maryam, as one of the overlooked films of that year. And anyway, it was a little film, and I played this Iranian who was an Iranian American who was very Americanized because the whole movie takes place in the late 70s. So I was this guy named Reza who loved Saturday Night Fever and like wanted to be a macho dude and whatever. And so that was the first official film that I was in. And I think that made me SAG eligible. It was one of those things where, what's it called? Taft-Hartley, right?
Yeah, you have to Taft-Hartley someone.
I got Taft-Hartley'd into it, and that you're the guy we need for this. So I went and I did it, and that got me qualified. And then I think the actual card came later when I did a commercial, I believe. And then because the independent film didn't pay me anything, barely. But then the commercial, I was like, well, now I got to pay in order to become a member. And there I was in the early 2000s, I guess, 99 or 2000 or so.
Did you do a lot of commercials starting out?
I did a handful of commercials. It's actually very interesting because, I mean, all the actors know it's a tough game. You show up and there's 1,000 people lined up for some part, and you're like, how am I going to get this? So the first commercial I actually did, gosh, it was a little bit of a bummer. I worked at an ad agency as an assistant in the creative department. And one of our clients, I think it was Jenny Craig. It was one of these weight loss groups. And they wanted to come up with an ad that wasn't just, hi, I'm so-and-so, I lost so many pounds, but they wanted to come up with something fun and creative. So they had this one commercial where there's a woman who is trying to lose weight, and she goes to dinner, and there's this over-the-top like French waiter who keeps bringing all these foods. And so to the credit of my boss, then he was like, he knew I wanted to be an actor, and I said, hey, I've seen this. Can I audition? He goes, go for it. So I went and I auditioned, and I got it. And so it was so much fun. And I was playing this like waiter who was like, today we have got the such and such and the such and such. And then at the end, I'm like, and of course, le dessert. And I show up with like a big cake or something. And the poor lady's like, so it was making fun of all of the temptation that comes when you're on one of these things. And I think they aired it a couple times, and then they got feedback saying, no, this is cruel and it's not as funny as you thought. And I was like, oh man, I was trying to make some residuals here. So that was one of the first commercials I did. And then after that, I did a handful of commercials. It's interesting. Commercials are interesting because you do them, and really, unless if it's like, Verizon guy or something, you might not see it if you're not looking for it. So one of the ones that I did that did really well for me, they did a Snap, Crackle, and Pop commercial where the 3 guys from Rice Krispies were being photographed by a British photographer. So I guess I did accents. So I played this British photographer who was like, work with me, do the pose, let's go. Come
I
on,
remember
Snap.
this.
Yeah, so I did that, and at the time I didn't have kids, and it was funny. I would run into a friend of mine who had kids, and he was like, dude, they're running your commercial. I was like, really? He's like, yes. I was like, that's fantastic. And I would just get paid for it. So that was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, I love that early on you were being cast against type as French and British.
I know French and British, and sometimes with commercials too. Though that's why it's gosh, I really don't know. I've I've made a film, so I've had to cast people, and I know how hard it is to cast people because you find someone, you go, oh, that's the person, and then someone else comes along, you're like, oh my God, that person just did even better. So I have no idea how commercials happen. There was one in particular where the part was just, I mean, there was I think it was for Chevy, it was some car, and I was the driver of the car in a suit going to work, and my coworker was sitting next to me trying to drink his coffee, and every time he would try to drink his coffee, I would put the brakes on because there was a song that goes andale andale mami ia oh what na 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 whatever that song is. So we're pulling up to a stop sign. The song kicks in. My friend's about to drink the coffee, and I start putting the brakes on to the song. So he's like, and he's looking at me, going, very funny. But I'm just some guy, and it could have been anybody, and I have no idea how I got it. And that again was another one that did really well. So I don't know. Commercials are just they blow my mind. I have no idea how they do it.
You must be a good auditioner.
I don't know. I went through, it wasn't like, I have friends who just like started, they would buy houses off of commercials. I had a handful that came through, then there was a few where like, the worst is when they got a pin in you, they're holding you. You're like, oh, I'm so close. And then, oh, they went with someone else. Come on. I don't know. I just, like I said, I did a handful of them and it was a lot of fun, and haven't done a commercial in ages.
Really? When was the last time you did one, you think?
The last commercial I did was it that one? It might've been that one. I did another one for IBM that was it was with, is it Joe Pitka? Is that his name? Joe Pitka?
The director. Yeah. Who did Space Jam.
He was this big guy, and he had this, he was known to be, just really kind of rambunctious, and he yell at people and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go there. He's yelling at me. But it was the opposite. He was super sweet to the actors. I heard him yelling a little bit to the crew, but to us, he was super nice. And this was an IBM commercial where they were introducing some new feature on IBM, and they had cast this young kid who had super bright blonde hair that he looked almost futuristic. And so he was this kid, and then we would sit across from him, all these different people. It was quick cuts, and we were feeding information to him. So he was basically the computer taking in the information. And I think they had some celebrities in it, and then they had me playing a professor, and then someone else playing something else. And then like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would come in and give him information about basketball, whatever it was. But that might've been the last one. And I'm guessing at least 15 years ago, at least.
Wow. I actually want to go back to the beginning because I'm curious, were you always interested in acting, and was comedy a way to get there, or was it always comedy that you wanted to do?
Combination. So I come from an immigrant background. My parents born in Iran. I was born in Iran. And so when we came to America, we came because of the Islamic Revolution was happening, late 70s, those protests in the streets. We actually left. My father was on business in New York. And I always tell the story of how nobody knew that the revolution was going to happen, because in the past there had been protests in Iran, but the Shah had always quashed the revolution, or the protests, I should say. So I think a lot of people back then thought that the Shah was going to, control the situation again, and life would go back to normal in Iran. Well, my father was on business in New York. We had protests, and also it was a really cold winter. Schools were shut down over the winter break, but they got shut down early. And I believe that's when my father told my mom to bring my sister and myself out to New York to spend a couple of weeks with him, in the hopes that while we're out there for those 2 weeks, things would quiet down. We could go back to Iran. And as a matter of fact, we left my baby brother back in Iran. He was a newborn baby. We left him there thinking we'll be back in 2 weeks. And so when we came to America, things just got worse and worse in Iran, and the protests got bigger and bigger. And then obviously the revolution happened, and Shah left. And so we never went back. So I always say we packed for 2 weeks, and we stayed for 40 whatever years now.
Were you able to get your baby brother?
Yeah, he came out a couple years later, so a year later, or whatever it was. But I think at a young age, I remember being around 9 or 10 years old, Eddie Murphy was just starting to really hit the scene, and I fell in love with what he was doing, and he cracked me up. And he was on Saturday Night Live at a young age and all that stuff. And going back to what I said earlier about my parents not really monitoring our TV viewing, back then I would stay up late watching Saturday Night Live. I would watch Evening at the Improv. I would watch the Rodney Dangerfield comedy specials, all that stuff. And I fell in love with all that, and I wanted to be that. But having immigrant parents, they really didn't understand how any of that worked. I think regular parents don't understand how Hollywood works, much less immigrant parents. So they would say, no, you need to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. But when I was 12 in junior high school in Northern California, Marin County, we had auditions for our school musical. And I went out and I auditioned. And I got the part of, it was The Boyfriend, and I got the part as one of the background dancers and singers. I was in the 7th grade. All the 8th graders got the big parts, and we got the smaller parts. One of the things that they taught us back then, the lady, her name, I still remember her name, the director, her name was Shirley Bonbright. And Shirley said, when you're on stage doing be smiling when you're singing and dancing, because that's what you do. And so we learned that. So I think I've kind of psychoanalyzed this later, but my parents being immigrant parents, I learned to respect my elders, like never question your elders. That was part of our culture. Always respect your elders. The American way says, question your elders. Who are they to know, So I think I was sick. I showed up and I told Ms. Bonbright, I said, Ms. Bonbright, I'm feeling under the weather, but I'm here today. She goes, okay, that's great. So now I'm singing and dancing. I'm smiling. I'm sick, but I'm smiling. Well, Ms. Bonbright stops the whole rehearsal. She's like, hey, he's sick. He's here. He's smiling. You should learn from him. And in my mind, I think it was because why wouldn't I be smiling? The authority figure has said to smile, whereas some of well, whatever that was, it served as an affirmation for me, I think, that I'm good at this. And it started there. And in our program, the teachers would say, hey, you've got the thing that it takes to do this. Like, I think I was uninhibited. I like being a ham on stage. And every time they would say that, my parents would say, you're crazy, to her and to me. So my parents kind of made me out. I went all the way, I detoured. I studied political science as an undergrad at UC Berkeley. I actually got into a PhD program at UCLA to become a professor. Meanwhile, though, I continued to do plays on the side. And every time I was on stage, I felt alive. And every time I was doing something else, I felt lost. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s working at that advertising agency that I was telling you about earlier. And I was talking to a gentleman there. His name was Joe Rhine. And Joe was a producer at the advertising agency, and he was older. He was in his 60s. And he saw me do a play I was doing on the side. And he goes, you're good at this. You're funny. Have you ever thought about pursuing acting as a profession? And I said, yeah, I wanted to, but I got, detoured this and that. I'm going to save up some money. And when I'm in my 30s, I'm going to go for it. And at the time, I was in my mid-20s. And he said, let me talk to you. He goes, listen, if this is really a passion of yours, do it now. Don't wait. Because he goes, I, Joe, am in my 60s now. And he goes, there were some things I wanted to do when I was in my 20s. And be honest with you, I never got around to doing it. So if you really want to do it, go, don't stop. And I realized it was like a light bulb moment. It all came together. And I enrolled in some improv classes at the Acme Theater. And I met a stand-up comedy teacher there. And she helped me, take stand-up comedy classes. And that was 22 years ago. I've been going since.
Wow. How did your parents take the news?
My father by then had moved back to Iran because my father had been a self-made millionaire, leaving Iran, coming to America with his money. He had an electric company in Iran. And then when he came to America, he bought a bunch of real estate and tried to get into the real estate game, but he lost a lot of his money in that. So by the early 90s, he'd lost his money. He went back to Iran to try and start his business back up. So at that point, I would just talk to my dad on the phone from time to time. Hey, I'm in grad school. Hey, I'm doing this. Hey, I'm doing that. And then at some point, I don't even know if I told him, but I was like, yeah, I'm leaving grad school for a little bit. We'll see what happens. And in his mind, he always said, once you get your degree, we'll work together. So I don't think he almost lived in denial of it because he was so far away. My mother, on the other hand, she was totally mortified by the whole, not mortified, but like she was totally, what's the word I'm looking for? She was not traumatized, not traumatized, but it really had affected her because she had originally wanted me to be a lawyer. And then I told her I wanted to be a professor. And in that, she was even worried because she goes, there's no job for professors. What are you doing? You're going to grad school to get a PhD. You're just going to end up with a bunch of debt. What are you talking about? Then when I left the PhD to go be an actor, she goes, are you out of your mind? Like she actually, I remember at one point she said, listen, you didn't become a lawyer. You didn't become a professor, at least become a mechanic. And I go, how'd you go from lawyer to mechanic? There's so many other jobs in between. And in her mind, she goes, no, people need a mechanic. Nobody needs an actor. So in her mind, being someone who had left the revolution and left her life to come to another country where she didn't speak any language, she was basically saying, learn a skill that you could use anywhere in the world. And now with the coronavirus, I'm like, maybe I should have become a mechanic. I wonder if people need mechanics because they don't need actors.
I think mechanics are considered essential.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm curious because your comedy is very observational and personal. How does your family now sort of feel about it? Because I believe your wife's a lawyer. Like she didn't sign up to be part of your act.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife, it's funny. She was a lawyer when we first met. And then once we had our kids and the company she was working for left town, she basically ended up staying with the kids, and I ended up, touring and all that. And now she'll do consulting work. But as you said, sometimes for the most part, I try, when I reveal stuff about my life and my family, it's not something that I feel that would be too private to that individual. Like recently, my son, who's 11, I had started to work some material about my son hitting his early teens, basically, or late child years and going into his teenage years. And I quickly stopped doing that material because I realized, well, that's something that's private for him. Like, I don't need to go there. I said, let me find the angle to go into this, birds and bees angle, but from my perspective, not from his perspective. So I really kind of turned it back on myself and the fact that coming from an immigrant family, we didn't do birds and bees, like, again, going back to my immigrant family, if I had asked my father about the birds and the bees, he'd say, we don't have birds and bees. We have lawyers and doctors, become one, So that was kind of the angle I took. So I try not to be too revealing if it's something that is going to be private about somebody else. But that said, family material has been in the culture for years and years, from back in the day when you had your Bill Cosby's or you had your Ray Romano's, all these people talking about their families. I think that when you talk about your family, you realize how much we're all going through the same thing. My wife and I and the kids, we love watching Blackish because there's so much we relate to, or Modern Family. It's so out there, but you still sometimes go, oh yeah, well, yeah, the whatever it is, the sporting event, the event at school or whatever. So I think the more you talk about your family, the more you realize how much we have in common. And I've toured all over the world with my stand-up. I've done shows in Australia. I've done shows in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Dubai, you name it. And when I do family material, there's always families that are relating to it. So I will continue to do it unless my wife or one of the kids goes, don't talk about that thing. And then I'll say, all right, I'm sorry, and I pull it out. But for the most part, I get my material from there, and I get my material from the news and politics and stuff. So it's a combination of both. And it's actually interesting to me because sometimes when I get to the politics is where people will get offended, depending on what side they fall on the politics. So it's funny because people will laugh with me at my family issues until I get to politics and I do a Trump joke, and then I get an email going, how dare you make fun of Trump? And I'm like, what about my kids? You didn't care about the kids? And they're like, no, we don't care about your kids.
What happens when the two collide? Because you do a great bit in Immigrant about your mom liking Trump. And that was 3 years ago. I don't know if she still feels the same way, but I think there's something universal. And, there's just something about moms are great for material.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think my mom, it's funny. I exaggerate my mom a lot. My mom is actually a very nice person, and she's very, she's a loving person. But there is this thing now I think a lot of people experience it with their parents or their grandparents, where they go, wait a minute, you like Trump? And then you're at the Thanksgiving dinner yelling at each other. So yeah, my mom, as an immigrant, as an Iranian immigrant, I think a lot of Iranians, do like Trump. And I think because Trump has spoken tough against Iran and increased sanctions. And so they don't see those sanctions as hurting the people of Iran, but rather they see it as crushing the government of Iran. So they feel that in any way possible, get rid of this government. And so there's still that debate going on. And so I will talk about it on stage sometimes. I go, these people don't see the hypocrisy of or the effects of these sanctions on the people of Iran. And I personally don't like the government of Iran either. They're an oppressive regime. But that said, I know that sanctions hurt the people of Iran. So I try to be objective and think about it. But meanwhile, my family or some other friends of mine, I had a friend of mine, this guy I met at a soccer game recently. That's the kids again. This guy I met at a soccer game recently, and this guy was like, listen, Maz, I'm a big fan of your comedy. I love you, but please don't make fun of Trump, man. He's going to get rid of the mullahs in Iran. And I go, how? He goes, I don't know. He's crazy. He's just going to figure it out. And I'm like, that's not a strategy. Crazy is not a strategy. So it continues. It continues. And my mom continues to give me material with it. And then I continue to get material from this stuff. And listen, the reason I was calling my tour the Peaceful Warrior Tour was because I originally allowed my anger and dislike of Trump to kind of seep into my comedy. And it was interesting because my daughter's friends keep doing the FaceTime. What happened was I was doing shows at the Hollywood Improv here, and I was doing some jokes about Trump. Listen, my take on any kind of joke, whether it's political, social, whatever, you better have a punchline. It can't just be didactic. You can't just be up there preaching. So I had punchlines, but at a certain point, someone in the audience got upset at the Trump jokes, and they started yelling back at me, and then I started yelling at them, and then we got into a yelling match. And the other audience members kind of turned at me and they were going, what's going on? Where'd the comedy? Where'd the jokes go? And I go, oh my God, you're right. I lost myself. Let's not do that again. So I decided to call my tour the Peaceful Warrior Tour, because I told myself the next time someone gets upset at my Trump jokes, I'm going to just try and deal with it in a peaceful way. And it's interesting to me because a lot of times people who get upset at Trump jokes, it's almost like you're making fun of their grandmother. I go, the whole point of living in America is we are supposed to make fun of our leaders, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter. As long as we have punchlines, let's go for it. Let's jab a little bit. Let's rib a little bit. But it's almost like they lose that idea, and they're like, you can't make fun of our leaders. So once I decided to be Peaceful Warrior, I had a couple of times where somebody got mad at my show in the middle of the Trump jokes, and they were, yeah, you shouldn't be talking about our president. Excuse me, what? You're making fun of our president. He's our leader. And I go, wow, and I just handled it very Tai Chi. I just was like, thank you so much for having this opinion. What a beautiful country we live in. You can have your opinion. You're damn right I got an opinion. Wow, that's beautiful. Listen, I'm in the middle of a show, so if you want, you can stay. I only have 3 more Trump jokes. You can stay. If you don't like it, you can leave. I'm going to leave. That's thank you for leaving, whatever you want. So it's amazing because the more peaceful you are, the crazier they get. And matter of fact, it happened at a comedy club called Flappers in Burbank, and we happened to have the footage because they were filming the set. So if people go on my YouTube channel, great plug for my YouTube, youtube.com/Maz Jobrani, they can see it, or if they put Maz Jobrani Trump heckler, they can see me just smiling through the whole bit because I'm really at just peaceful warrioring it. And this lady is losing her mind. And I'm just like, it's all right. It's fine. Peaceful warrior. So that's become my take on getting into these arguments when it comes to the politics.
And you were, I think, in the midst of your tour when we sort of got shut down.
Yeah, I was mid-tour. I was actually getting ready. It was interesting because what had happened was, people now the debate is, were we warned in time? Did Trump know? Did he not know? He's saying, I knew, I shut down China, this and that. But just yesterday, I don't know when this is going to air, but I saw there was a reporter asking him, you're saying you knew about this, but all through the month of February, you were having rallies with a bunch of people. So did you know or you didn't know? And he's like, oh, I shut down. And then he's yelling with the reporter.
Yes, he told her, calm down, lower your voice.
Calm down. It was actually very funny because she was Asian, and I don't know if she's Asian American or what, but he goes, what network are you with? What network? He was waiting for her to say, I'm with the Chinese network or whatever. He goes, I'm with CBS. He's like, oh, okay. Well, listen, here's my thing. But what's interesting is through the month of February, because I have a friend of mine, one of my closest friends, we've gotten into debates on WhatsApp about it. And he's like, Trump did the right thing, this and that. And I go, yeah, but they didn't do the right thing, because if they knew, then they should have shut stuff down earlier. And he's like, I was at your comedy show end of January, and neither one of us was doing anything. I go, but yeah, we're not the government. Like I shouldn't have to be the one shutting things down. Well, all through the month of February, I had shows. Nobody mentioned anything about shutting anything down. And then towards the end of February, I had a couple of events and shows. Again, there was talk, but no government official had said shut it down yet. So I was at a couple of events in Austin. I was at an event in Berkeley. And I actually, coming off of that stuff, this is end of February, I actually was worried. I go, I've been around a lot of people. I go, maybe I got it. I don't know. And then into early March, I had a show in Toronto. It was the same weekend. I was going to go Jersey, Ottawa, Toronto. And the truth is, the people in Toronto, there's a big Iranian population in Toronto, and they were the ones who started sending emails to me and my promoter saying, please don't come to do your show in Toronto. They said, because we have a lot of Iranians who travel back and forth between Toronto and Iran had a big outbreak already. So all these fans who bought tickets to the Toronto show said, we're worried to come to your show because we're afraid that people have it. And they were ahead of the curve by a week or whatever it was. So I actually, when I reached out to cancel my shows in New Jersey and in Ottawa and in Toronto, the theaters themselves, because the government hadn't said anything, the theaters were saying, no, we're ready to have the shows. So come do your shows. And I said, look, my community is telling me something's coming. And this was early March. And so we canceled those shows. And a week later, by whatever it was, March 9th, 10th, 11th, is when our government started shutting things down. So it was very interesting to see that. And since then, all my shows got postponed and pushed to the future. And we kept saying, okay, midsummer. Now we're saying, okay, fall. Now we're saying we don't know when. So it's this situation where we really don't know when the next live shows are going to be. I've just been doing, rants every day. I do a rant at 4 p.m. on my Instagram Live. And that's my way of doing my comedy. I do 15 minutes every day. And I have been getting contacted by different people who are putting on virtual comedy shows. So we'll see. Comedians, we need an audience. We need an audience to laugh. You say something, you need to hear the laugh, So that's been the tough thing to figure out. But some people have started to put shows together. And then my question is, well, in a time when people are losing their jobs, how do I charge people money to come watch me? Because I don't feel comfortable necessarily doing that. So there is a friend who told me that they're doing these live shows and they're just telling people, tip if you can, basically. So, tip if you can. If you can't, no big deal. Maybe that's the future of comedy for now. I don't know.
So at what point did you get the idea to sort of take the Instagram Live, or is that something you've done before?
No, the Instagram Live, I've done Instagram Live before, but a lot more, less frequently. So I forget when it was, maybe a day or two in, I just said, let me try an Instagram Live. And part of it was like trying to tell jokes and rant about what's going on. Part of it was you get to play music and dance or whatever. And a big part of it is, as a comedian, we want to express ourselves creatively. And so I always tell people when they say, oh, I want to be a stand-up comedian, I go, well, get on stage 5 to 10 times a week and write as much as you can. Well, here we are. I can't get on stage anymore. So it would be one thing if I just, decided not to do anything and just wait for something to happen. But I think it was that desire to talk about what's going on that made me go online. And then I realized I need to pick a time of day for people to know consistently that I'll be there. Then I thought I should try and be consistent and go every day. Well, now I'm tied to it. Like the past few days, I'll be honest with you, come 4 p.m. LA time, I've kind of been a little tired and felt like, I don't want to do it, but I was like, I got to do it. So I get on right around 4. And I've had some guests on recently, but for the most part, I'll go on and like yesterday's, I went on and ranted about all these protests that are happening where people are like, oh, let's end the shutdown and get back to work. And I'm like, what are you, crazy? I go, we're not past the thing. You're going to go back to a restaurant and some guy's going to be there with a mask taking your order. And subconsciously, you're going to be thinking, well, he's probably got the virus. Let's get the hell out of this restaurant. I'm like, are you an idiot? Stay home. What's wrong with you with your, I want to be free. Like, Trump tweeted, liberate this place, liberate. I go, liberate? We're not in prison. We're in America. You're just in your homes. Relax. There's actual countries where people are in prison. They need to liberate. We don't need to liberate. You need to just chill. You see protesters going in front of medical frontline workers, honking at them and saying, get out of my way, whatever. I'm like, you just clueless idiots. Like it really got under my skin. So I'm in my car ranting about it. And it's fun. It gets it off my chest. It's a way to be creative. And then what I do is I take the rant, like I'll do 15, 20 minutes. Usually it's me just being silly. I'll dance. Then I'll tell people about what's going on in my life. We had a mouse in my house. I've been reporting about the mouse. Our dryer stopped working and some Russian guy came to fix it and then he just disappeared. So I just tell about what's going on in my life. And then I'll take like highlights of it and I'll post it on my Instagram, my regular timeline. So people can either tune in every day at 4 for 15 minutes to see what kind of craziness is going on and what I'm talking about and dance a little bit and listen to like 90s discos or 80s disco music, or they can watch the story or the live, whatever, saying my regular feed and be like, oh, that's the highlights of it. So, but for me, it's become, like I said, sometimes I'm tired. I'll walk past my wife to come into this room. I'll be like, she's in the kitchen doing something. I'm like, I'm going to work. And I've been wearing, so here's the thing. I call it the Purple Glove Show. And the reason it's the Purple Glove Show is because early on, first of all, I grabbed a microphone that we bought from my daughter to do karaoke, and it doesn't work. I just hold the microphone so I feel like I'm doing stand-up. And then I put on the purple glove because it was this dishwashing glove. And my wife had said, listen, we got to wear gloves when we're out of the house or whatever. So we bought some gloves that were, medical or whatever, orange gloves that were like the clean gloves that you wear and then you can dispose of. But since we didn't want to use those gloves, I started using the dishwashing gloves. So I wear one hand has my dishwashing glove holding the microphone. The other hand has no glove. And people that are new to it will be like, why are you wearing one glove? And I go, well, this is my sanitized glove. So this is the glove that I can scratch myself with. But if this hand comes close, this hand has to get in the way and stop this hand from itching it. It's just me being silly and stupid, but whatever. It's the Purple Glove Show. That's it.
Great premise for a horror movie, actually.
The Purple Glove Show. Yeah, actually, you know what? Maybe I'll do an episode where the purple glove is this hand is trying to get the purple glove. Yeah, a horror flick. It'll just be hands.
Or a body swap where the glove ends up on the other hand. I don't need to pitch you ideas. Sorry.
That's great. No, I love it.
Been watching a lot of body swap movies lately. I want to touch some more on your acting career because obviously you're so great on Superior Donuts. You've been in Better Off Ted, and you have this movie that's available for streaming now, A Simple Wedding. And it's kind of cool because it's a rom-com with a Middle Eastern family as one of the families. I don't know how often something like that comes along.
Not very often at all. One of my goals throughout my career has been to end up doing a show based on a Middle Eastern family or an Iranian American family that's just like, Everybody Loves Raymond, but with an Iranian family. And I've sold that concept a few times to CBS and it never made air. It made it to the air. And then this past year we had a script we worked with Warner Brothers on and none of the networks bought it. Again, I think we're trying to do our fresh off the boat. We're trying to do our Blackish, whatever that is. So I will continue to try that. Meanwhile, this movie, A Simple Wedding, was written by a girl named Sara Zandieh. She's an Iranian-American woman who is, she's very smart, very, very, very good at what she does. And she'd written this movie that was kind of like Big Fat Greek Wedding for an Iranian family. And it stars a lady named Tara Grami, who's very talented. Co-stars Shohreh Aghdashlu as her mom, Hushang Tozi as her father, and Rita Wilson is in it as well, playing the mother of the American guy. So it's a story of an Iranian American girl who wants to get married to an American guy, played by Chris O'Shea. And so, like you said, it's a rom-com, and I play the uncle of the Iranian American girl. And it was a fun part to play. I got to do some comedy, but I also got to do some pretty straight stuff. As a comedic actor, you always try to do, you're looking for some straight stuff always. And in the movie, actually, Rita Wilson and I fall for each other. So it was interesting because when the coronavirus hit, because in the movie I kiss her. So when the coronavirus hit, I had people that had seen the movie texting me going, "Did you give it to her?" I go, "No, that movie was shot 2 years ago."
It took 3 years to manifest.
Exactly.
But they're still finding a way to blame you.
Yeah.
What has been your most challenging role as an actor?
Gosh, challenging. I don't know. I just love being in any part that's fun and I mean, that's well written. Friday After Next was a lot of fun. You mentioned doing Superior Donuts. That was fun. There's a movie we're trying to make. It's called Azadeh. It's a movie about an Iranian girl during the Iran-Iraq War who loves ballet. And it's a time when Iran, it's a very dark era in Iran's history. And so Western dance is not allowed. So she has to go underground to do the ballet. And I would play her father in this. But we've had a tragic incident happen in our lives. And so that could be a very challenging movie. It's written by another Iranian-American woman. Actually, she's a Greek Iranian-American. Her name is Sofia Kiapos, and she's written this script. And it's, I kind of call it like the Persian version of Moonlight. There's a lot going on. And she wants to shoot it in Farsi, Persian, kind of like they did Roma. It's an interesting concept, so the idea being an American-made independent film, all in Persian. And I speak Persian, but I don't read and write Persian. So that can be challenging, and also it's very dramatic. So I see that as something that hopefully, if we're able to do, could be a very challenging and a beautiful part to do. Up until now, I would say the movie I made called Jimmy Westwood, American Hero, which was, I describe it as the Persian Pink Panther. It's like a slapstick movie. It's a fun movie. I co-wrote it with my friend Amir Ohebsian and produced it with my manager, Ray Mohit. I played the slapstick guy, Jimmy Westwood, and he's this guy who wins the green card lottery in Iran, and he comes to America, and he just wants to be an American hero, and he finds himself in this conspiracy to kind of take Iran and America to war. And the reason it was challenging, it was a lot of fun. The only reason it was so challenging was, first of all, it took us so long to write it, Amir and I. Then we raised the funds ourselves through Indiegogo with me, Amir, and Ray. We produced it. We self-distributed it. It was directed by Jonathan Kesselman, who had directed The Hebrew Hammer. And it was challenging because being a writer and a producer and the star and having 18 days to shoot it, it was just a lot of work. You'd shoot it all day, you'd go home, you try to sleep, but your mind's thinking about the scenes that you shot and going like, oh, we should have done this, should have done that. And then your mind starts thinking about, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. So it was the most challenging and the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. But it still lives on. Like, people still find it, on iTunes and on Amazon, and also clips of it now on Instagram and all these other places. So it's very rewarding. That's one of the things I always tell every actor. If you can find something to produce for yourself, if you can create your own opportunities, whether it's a short film or it's a series or whatever, go for it, go for it, go for it.
Especially right now, we have time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I'm doing, like I said, the Purple Glove show. I'm getting ready to create a wine show that revolves around wine and comedy. So hopefully that'll come out soon. So absolutely, it's funny. Somebody was saying to me, my friend was like, can let's get on a call. Let's catch up. I go, I will, but I'm super busy. He goes, busy doing what? I go, I'm trying to get a career going. And meanwhile, being home, you got your cooking, your cleaning, I'm IT, I'm tech support for the kids. There's a lot going on in the middle of this, trying to exercise. So I'm busier than ever. Not a lot of income, but busy.
Before we go, I think a lot of people probably know you very well from the NPR program, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. You've won 15 times.
Have I?
15 well, I think some of them were ties, but that counts as a win. Is there a secret? Because I know people who have been on that show a few times and never won.
Well, listen, I learned actually a few years ago, that like 2 years ago, they did, maybe it was last year, 2 years, whatever it was. They did their like 20-year anniversary or something, and they had all of us go out to Chicago and do a big live show. And it was a lot of fun. Everybody was there. And as part of it, they said, we're going to do some sort of like speed round or something. I forget what it was, but we all got there was 3 microphones. They set up 3 microphones, and they made teams of whatever it was, 7 or 8. And we all lined up, and they made 3 of us team captains based on the infrequency of having won. So the people who lost the most. And I think it was me, Brian Babylon, and Paula Poundstone. I think it was us. We were the team captains. And I was like, what? I thought I'd won more. They're like, no, you haven't won enough. So the truth is, early on, I tried to win at Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And then quickly I realized, as a stand-up comedian, my job is to have jokes. So now I just try to prepare with jokes. They don't give us the week subjects before we go on, but you got to just think to yourself, what happened this week? Let me have a few jokes ready. And then if a topic is introduced, just be ready to riff on it and hope that those jokes, because when we record the shows, they go about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Then they edit it down to about 50 minutes because that's how long it airs on NPR. So a lot of jokes don't even make it. So your hope is that the jokes that you made make it. And if you win, that's a bonus. If you don't, hopefully you got a couple of laughs out of it.
I was just talking to Maeve Higgins, who has never won.
Maeve is amazing. She's very funny. Actually, Maeve was at the Austin, Texas show that I did. So we were trying to launch, and hopefully we will launch when this is all over, a Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me stand-up comedy tour. So it was me, Maeve, Alonzo Bowden, and Helen Hong. We did 2 big theater shows in Austin, and it was fantastic. And she's so funny. And like I said, she's well known, but she hasn't won, but she's funny. And that's what it is. You got to be funny.
She doesn't seem very confident about her chances in the future either.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on her, but that's fine. I wouldn't bet on me either.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, especially during recess.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk, and I'm happy that my daughter's friends stopped calling.
And please, everyone, before we go, I should remind everyone you can get information about the COVID-19 Relief Fund in the comments. You can also, of course, check out Maz Jobrani on Instagram Live. Simple Wedding is now streaming. You can also check out the movie he co-wrote, Jimmy Vestwood, American Hero. And also a special on Netflix, Immigrant, is still airing. Thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys.